Good morning, children. This is the third part of the analysis session of the lesson Lost Spring. If you did not watch the first and the second part, subscribe the channel, watch and come back. With this part, we will complete the first story from the lesson The Lost Spring. Let us go to the analysis. Ration cards that get their names on voters, but they have the ration card with them. Some politicians help them to get their ration cards. And without they have lived here for more than 30 years without an identity, without permits, but with ration cards that get their names on voters list and enable them to buy grain. Why they got these ration cards? Because if their names are there in the ration cards, they have the right for vote, franchise. Only for that purpose, these politicians helped them. These politicians helped them only to get a collective vote bank from these immigrants. Look at the next sentence. Food is more important for survival than an identity. For these people, food is more important. Food is the basic need than an identity. If the basic needs are fulfilled, then only they can think about the next steps of identity and other values. So food is more important for these people. If at the end of the day, we can feed our families and go to bed without an aching stomach, we would rather live here than in the fields that gave us no grain. Say a group of women in tattered saris, when I asked them why they left their beautiful land of green fields and rivers. So this is the reason the women folk of Simapuri say to the writer, they are getting at least to fill their stomach. Their family can go to bed without an aching stomach. That was devoid at Dhaka. This is the reason why they left their green fields and come to live in this wilderness. Their beautiful land and green fields and rivers. Wherever they find food, they pitch their tents. Pitch means set up. They set up their tents that become transit homes. Transit means makeshift. These people live in makeshift homes. Wherever they can find food, they immediately arise a tent and live there. The children grow up in them, becoming partners in survival. And the children have to do their work, have to perform their part for survival. And what is survival in Simapuri? Look at the next sentence. And the survival in Simapuri means rag picking. This is the only work, this is the only job they can do in Simapuri. Through the years, it has acquired the proportions of a fine art. When they did it for several years, it acquired the proportions of a fine art, the easiness of a fine art. Mind The literary device of antithesis used here when rat picking is compared with that of performing a fine arts. Look at the next sentence. Garbage to them is gold. So here the writer repeats the idea of garbage to gold. This ironical statement she repeats in several places of the story. It is their daily bread, a roof over their heads, even if it is a leaking roof, because this garbage provides them their daily bread and at least a leaking roof over their heads. So they consider this garbage as gold for them. But for a child, it is even more. But in the case of these children, this garbage is more than a gold, she says. Let us check what it is. Look at the next paragraph. I sometimes find a rupee, even a 10 rupee note, Sahib says, his eyes lighting up. That's why the writer says, for the child, this garbage is something more than the elders. When you can find a silver coin in a heap of garbage, you don't stop scrounging, for there is hope of finding more. This is the wonder with the children. When they find 1 or 2 rupees from the garbage, they search again for finding more. It seems that for children, garbage has a meaning different from what it means to their parents. For the children, it is wrapped in wonder. Yes, these children consider the garbage as a wrapped up wonder. But for the elders, it's a means of survival. For the elder people, the garbage is their means of survival. But for the children, it is something more, one step more than for the elders. They consider the garbage as a wrapped up wonder, because sometimes they find 1 rupee or sometimes a 10 rupee, a silver coin in it that thrills them to scrounge more in it. Go to the next paragraph. One winter morning, I see Sahib standing by the fenced gate of the neighborhood club, watching 2 young men dressed in white playing tennis. I like the game, he hums, content to watch it standing behind the fence. So here a comparative world is brought out. The child wants to enjoy the sophisticated games, but a fencing is there in between these two worlds. He can't enter, he can't break this fencing, and he stands always outside this fencing. This is the comparison, the poet, the writer trying to. I go inside when no one is around, he admits. The gatekeeper lets me use the swing. Sahib too is wearing tennis shoes that look strange over his discolored shirt and shorts. Someone gave them to me, he says in the manner of an explanation. Here, the writer, after many days, meets with Sahib. She notices little changes happening in the boy. Now he is wearing a tennis shoes, but the shoes that he wears is mismatched with his discolored and faded shirt and shorts. He justifies his side. He says, someone gave him the shoes. That's a manner of explanation he observes this. But the writer thinks that the fact is these are the discarded shoes of some rich boy who might have thrown away because one of them has a hole in it. It's a matter for the rich boy, but it is not at all a matter for Sahib. So he takes it and wears. For one who has walked barefoot, even shoes with a hole is a dream come true. The circumstances of these children have given them no chance of weighing or considering self-esteem. They live with the unwanted and thrown away things of others. So Sahib thinks it is better shoes with a hole better than without having shoes. But at the same time, the game he is intently watching, that is out of his reach, still he has to travel miles and miles to reach at the game of tennis. He is now totally in a position, unattainable position to the game he is intently watching. Look at the last paragraph of the first story. This morning, Sahib is on his way to the milk booth. In his hand is a steel canister. I now work in a tea stall down the road, he says, pointing in the distance. I am paid 800 rupees and all my meals. Does he like the job? I ask. His face, I see, has lost the carefree look. The steel canister seems heavier than the plastic bag he would carry so lightly over his shoulder. The bag was his. The canister belongs to the man who owns the tea shop. Sahib is no longer his master. After several days, when the writer sees him this morning, he is on his way to a milk booth and he carries a steel canister in his hand. He says he works in a tea stall down the road, pointing at a distance. He adds that he is paid 800 rupees and all his meals. But when the writer notices his face, she asks this question: does he like the job? Immediately his face, that lost its carefree look, she can read certain restraints from his faded face. She writes, the steel canister seems heavier than the plastic bag he would carry so lightly over his shoulder. When she compares the two roles of Sahib, first as the rag picker and now as a child laborer, even though he is paid 800 rupees and all his meals, the steel canister which he carries to the milk booth seems heavier than the rug picking bag which he would carry so easily over his shoulders. The difference here is the writer herself gives the reader the bag was his, and this canister belongs to the man who owns the tea shop. Now he is no more his own master. His childhood is stolen by the circumstances of his life. At the time of going school, he is destined to work under the tea shop owner. He is a victim of child labor. That is the story. With this, we come to the end of the first part of the story, Lost Spring. Next, the second story from the same lesson, Lost Spring, I Want to Drive a Car, that we will do later.